Good morning. This is Sergeant Hill, and I'd like to welcome Mr. Harris. He's going to present Address Your Stress. Thank you for joining us. Mr. Harris, take it away.
Absolutely. Brian and Sergeant Hill, excuse me, and Ken, thank you guys for the opportunity to support the North Carolina Army Guard event. My understanding is a lot of you who are watching this or who will be watching this pretty soon were heavily involved in our COVID related operations. I want to just first and say and extend a very warm thank you for your service and thank you for the support that you provided for our country during a pretty challenging time. And as we know, those times also come with a lot of stress. So I'll just introduce myself too. So I am DeAnthony Harris. I'm a captain in the Air Force Reserve. So I come to you from the reserve side of the house of the Air Force Reserve Command. Currently, I'm stationed and assigned at a unit at Keesler Air Force Base in Biloxi, Mississippi, at an air medical evacuation squadron, which my squadron was also heavily involved in a lot of the COVID related operations. I am a spouse of an Air Force Reserve nurse. Who was tasked to do some work with COVID operations too. So I've experienced a lot of, I'm sure some of the same things you all have experienced from various angles. And so I'm also a licensed professional counselor in my civilian capacity. I currently have a private practice, in Atlanta, Georgia, where I primarily focus on working with veterans, especially those that have struggled with post-traumatic stress disorder. I've been in the Air Force for about 15 years. Started out enlisted, security police officer, security forces at Dobbins Air Force Base, and then eventually transferred to become a mental health tech and now a healthcare administrator. So I've been around the military for quite some time too. So I am your brother in arms as well. Today, I come to you from the Office of Secretary of Defense as a Yellow Ribbon cadre. And many of you who have gone to Yellow Ribbon events before, you know that, OSD will send out a group of people who can come and train and teach these wonderful presentations on stress, resiliency, relationship, communications. And today we're gonna offer up two of those. We're gonna offer up one on stress and also one on finding balance. So I hope you kind of tune in for both of those. I just want to say first and foremost, as somebody who has worked with the Yellow Ribbon program for the Air Force Reserve Command for at least the last 5 years on the active duty tour, I just wanted to say I know firsthand how Yellow Ribbon information that you receive during this event, for some of you who deploy often, can become a little cliche. Sometimes you can come here and you can hear people talking about stress, people talking about resiliency. You can hear that information over and over again, and every now and then it can just kind of become deaf tone to it. But I want to encourage all of you to really allow yourself to be open to some of the new information that's coming through the speakers, and to because every now and then life changes, and you can get married, you can have children, you can go to school. Life for us as reservists, as part-timers, as some would say, as guardmen and reservists, life can change. And so the information can help us out in new ways. So finding a way to take the information that I'm gonna go over today, or that you might hear in other Yellow Ribbon events to come, finding a way to apply it, even if it's just one way to your life. I want to highly encourage you guys to do that. So um, with that being said, let's get started. So today we're going to talk about address your stress. I'm excited about this class because the information we talk about can help you reduce the stress you feel in your life. Everyone experiences stress, and most people want to handle stress a lot better. I don't know how many of you would say listening that I feel like I've written the book on how to handle stress. If you have done so, please get with Sergeant Hill and give me your contact information, because I would love to know that. And it'll probably make me a very wealthy person if you figured out, how to manage stress. The military recognized that it places tremendous amounts of stress on part-timers, especially reserve members and guard members who are asked to not only deploy, go fight the fight, go support the missions in different areas of this world, but we're also asked to leave our families, to leave our children, to leave our significant others and our spouses. We place a significant amount of stress on our members. And we're asking them throughout all of this, we want you to continue to be resilient in everyday life. We want you to come back from those deployments. We want you to reintegrate back into your communities, to integrate back into your jobs, to integrate back into your families. But we want you to do so in a way that is resilient. And I think we all can agree to the fact that it's not quite as easy as it sounds sometimes. And there are times where we often struggle with that process of reintegration, and stress sometimes is the hallmark of that. Why is that? Because we come from, when we're deployed and we're in deployed environments, we are experiencing a different level of stress oftentimes than when we are at home in our own elements. It is a term called operational stress, to where our stress level rises to the occasion to meet the need of the situations and places that we're in. And sometimes there's more urgency because we're on mission, we're in a mission. There's a more, sense of got to get things done, got to move, got to accomplish the goals and the missions. And then when we come back home, it's difficult to kind of detach from that operational level stress. And so addressing your stress allows us to tune into, what are those stresses like in when we are there, or when we're back, or when we're back at home. So let's begin by answering these 4 questions. And if you're with your family, if you're sitting at the table, if you're watching this, through your through social media, I just want you to take time to consider 4 questions. And if you don't get anything else from this whole presentation, I really would like for you to answer these questions. One is, what causes stress in your life? If you take a moment to kind of make a note of that or write that down, I really would like you to do so. And 2, what makes you feel off balance? And how do you know you're stressed? And 4th, and lastly, what do you do to cope or deal with stress? And if you're sitting at the table right now, or if you're with someone, ponder those 4 questions for a moment. Really look at each other, really have a conversation, and really ask yourself, what causes stress in my life? What makes me feel off balance? And how do I know when I'm stressed out? And how have I learned to cope with stress? So if you get a chance, you can write these answers on a note cards, and it gives you a chance to just kind of think about the stress you have or currently having in your life. It allows this conversation, this very important conversation, to get started. So our simple objective for today is going to be, how to identify when stress impacts my well-being, identify strategies and techniques to address the other stress in my life. And so as we talk about it, stress is the response we have when life challenges seem greater than our ability to handle them. Have anybody ever been there? I mean, I know having a kid sometimes can kind of present that challenge, but whenever when response to life, whenever life challenges seem greater than our ability to handle them, it doesn't matter how old we are, how much experience we have, how long we've been in the military, what our rank is. At some point, our ability to cope with life will be tested. That whether that's in military, whether that's work related, whether that's in our marriages, whether that's in our families, whether that's in parenting, at some point, our resiliency, our ability to cope with life will be tested. And the important part is being able to identify what is happening with me internally whenever that is whenever I'm in that place and situation. So stressors causes our stress. We're exposed to stresses every day, and the experience of stress is common. So you identified your own stressors earlier when you pinpointed what causes you stress in the exercise. And so learning that stresses can have a negative impact on our bodies, our minds, and our emotions. And sometimes stresses impact more than one life area, which can be difficult. Stresses don't seem to want to stay in one area of our lives. They seem to want to, matriculate and move into other areas and other phases. So stresses refer to events, um, experiences we encounter. Stresses can be real occurrences, or they can be the result of how we interpret a situation. And we're going to get into some of that a little bit more later. Whether stresses are real or perceived, they can still disrupt our balance. If any of you are interested in doing some further studies on stress, there's the scientist he's from the university, he's from Stanford University, Dr. Sapolsky, and he kind of wrote this book called Why Does Zebra Get Ulcers? And basically what he suggested in this book, he talked about animals having a stress response system, of course, whenever they're being chased by a lion, or say a zebra is being chased by a lion, and not zebras running, running, running because they've activated their entire stress response system. And not zebra is running, trying to escape. He is in flight or fight mode, and that lion is trying to chase him. But let's say that zebra somehow escapes. And within 30 to 40 minutes, that zebra goes back to having balance, homeostasis in their bodies. They're balanced. They're back to drinking water and eating food. Sapolsky suggested that we activate the same stress response systems, and there's oftentimes no lion chasing us, that we can activate the same level of stress response just from a thought. And we don't always go back to normalcy or balance shortly after the stressor has gone away, because it is something that we're perceiving. It often stays with us for a long period of time. And there are people who have carried a activated stress, a high stress response system for weeks, for months, and for years. We're at this elevated level of stress response. And because we cannot control everything that happens to us, this class focuses on how we perceive what is happening to us. So perceived stress is subjective, and it reflects our appraisal of a scenario or a situation. Perceived stress is our interpretation of what something may mean, and we may read more into a circumstance than is warranted, and then react to it as though our interpretation is real. So for example, a perceived stressor might be, my husband is late. He must have been in a car accident. Well, that is a perceived stressor, because there's something that I'm making a direct appraisal of a situation, and not having entirely all of the information that is there. The husband could be late for any number of reasons. Maybe he cannot find his keys. But if you look at the amount of the appraisal that I'm making of the situation, it is causing stress for me. And the moment we have a stressful thought, we secrete what we call stressful hormones. Some of you probably heard of those. Adrenaline, epinephrine, neuroepinephrine, glucocorticoids. We secrete stress hormones that tells our bodies, you need to do something, because this is a dire situation. And whenever we secrete stress hormones, it causes our hearts to be elevated, and it causes us to move, because it was a system that was designed for survival. But what's happened to us as humans is that now that we perceive certain stressors, is happening just because the way that we're appraising a situation. So what am I saying in a nutshell? Maybe in some ways we can cut down on our stress if we can learn to appraise situations more accurately. That can cut down on a little bit of our stress. So good stress, there is good stress. Um, and believe it or not, one of the top 20, I think, stressors is happening pretty soon. Of course, it's Christmas. I was kind of surprised. I've always heard it, but I was surprised to see that no, it's a real thing. Christmas is stressful, and like I knew it. That was the reason why I avoided it. Just kidding. But it can be a good stress. So moderate stress can keep us sharp, alert, and energized. But too much stress can be harmful for our well-being. So in fact, when we feel somewhat stressed, we usually perform at a better than normal level, which is kind of like what I talked about with our operational stress. When we're in a deployed situation, you're on a go, you're focused. Your brain is saying, hey, you're more vigilant, you're more alert. And that's what adrenaline does for us. It gives us that hormone, that energy that we need to be very focused. Moderate stress, especially when we perceive it as challenge or as something that can make us perform better, can keep us sharp, as I just stated, alert and energized. And moderate lifetime stress might make us more resilient. Very true. And good stress can drive us to perform heroic acts, ace a job interview, reach a personal goal, or make a positive life change, like getting married or having a child. However, too much stress, especially in the form of loss or threat, is different, and this can be harmful for our well-being. So there is that good stress, and sometimes, folks, we pay to be stressed out. There's other forms of good stress. It's kind of like going on a roller coaster ride. You pay to activate your stress response system because you want somebody to drop you like several hundreds of feet out of the air, and we call that a good time. But it is a way of activating our stress response system in a good way, right? So our body experiences, and when we look at um, stress as a whole, how do we know when we are stressed, even if that's good or even if that's not so good stress, or what happens to your body when you are stressed? Well, kind of like I talked about with that zebra earlier, we can feel that something is happening to our bodies when we're starting to have elevated stress. The stress response involves multiple reactions in the body. Our body changes when we are exposed to stresses that we do not think we can handle, right? And what might surprise you is how big of an impact stress can have on the body. As I told you before, um, whenever our stress response system is activated, as we have learned to do even through our appraisal and perceptions of situations, our heart starts to beat faster. Our blood vessel starts to constrict. We start to shut off certain parts of our brains because, as that zebra is running away from that lion, that the brain doesn't need the zebra to figure out how sharp the lion's teeth are. It needs the zebra to get out of the way. And when we've activated our stress response system, our brain really doesn't need us to figure out exactly all of the minute details about what's going on with that stressor. It just wants us to find a way to escape it. So it prepares the body for a fight and it prepares the body to move. For example, if you're speaking in front of others, here's a small example. In front of others, you're faced with performing this task. So your body will set off a chain of reactions. Your breathing may increase, your heart rate may increase, and your palms may sweat. You may even feel a sense of danger, right? This sense of fear is your nervous system reacting to stress. Stress also turns off the bodily processes that helps us to relax and feel calm. That's why it becomes very difficult for a lot of us to feel like that sense of balance. That part of the balance that is talking about, that is our parasympathetic nervous system. That is the part of our body that allows us that brings us back into balance, that allows us to feel that sense of calm again, that helps us achieve that homeostasis, which is the balance between our sympathetic and our parasympathetic nervous system. And the reason why is because we have stress hormones in us that's causing us to have these bodily reactions. Stress also affects your immune system. Prolonged stress, and is what we was talking about earlier, from real or perceived stress. Make sure you note that I say that real or perceived wears us down. So yes, the body and the immune system can be impacted by perceived stress as well as real stress. Meaning, again, kind of goes back to how I appraise certain situations. Repeated exposure to stress makes us more vulnerable to colds, flu, any other sicknesses um, that are out there. It also can diminish our energy. When we are under stress, our ability to recall information over time may decrease. It affects our memory in that way. We're more likely to have negative moods, and our daily chores may seem more difficult to handle, folks. um, Stress can be very damaging, and this is why it's important. There's some stressful situations that that are real, and may not be able to avoid it as it is, but then there are other places in our lives, or things that we perceive that can be hurtful. um, I know one example was, and I don't know if I think it's in here, in is learning that when I see a situation a certain way, kind of really trying to make that determination. Okay, is this real, or is this something that is perceived? Um, but there is a real cascade of bodily events that takes place whenever our stress response system is activated. And it's simply because the brain is telling the body that the moment it perceives or it feels something that's stress, it prepares the body to address the stress as it is. And that comes with a cascade of physical changes that is happening with our bodies. And another thing that the research showed too is that the more elevated our heart rates are due to stress, perceived or real, over time, the less likely we will be to handle even smaller stressors over time. Which means our ability to be resilient in the face of other stressors decreases over time, meaning it takes less to feel more stress when we are not addressing our stress in a healthy way. Like I said before, we become our ability to recall information decreases. Our ability to, we'll have more negative moods over time just due to the sensitivity of stress. Why? Because we become more sensitive to the stress hormones, and it takes less of that stress hormone to bring us to the place of irritability, frustration, and so on and so forth. So, what do we do with all of this? You said you taken us through all of these different things. You told us how stressed out we are and how much my body is going to be affected by it. What do we do? Here's some stress busting strategies. But I think the first and foremost thing to do is to identify whether it's real or whether it's perceived. And this is something that can be helpful by journaling about the stress and worry. And sometimes when you journal about it, it allows you to see it objectively, and not subjectively. I always call journaling a way of taking 1,000-foot view of my life and allowing myself to see that stressor from a distance and not so up close. For example, if I were to say, I don't think my mother-in-law, if I were to say my mother-in-law doesn't like me, is that real or perceived? Well, that might be, it could be real if she just came out and told me, or it could be something that I'm perceiving. And if I take time to really write that down in my journal, then I'll be able to kind of maybe make a better appraisal of that situation. So journal about your stress and worry. Also take the perspective of a detached observer. It's similar to what I said, a 1,000-foot view. Um, I, I was, and also another word for that is kind of like an area view. You think about like Central City Park in New York, that is a huge park. And if you're standing in Central City Park, you're only able to see an area that's around you, a very small area. But if you take an aerial view of that park, you can see that, that little small area is like peanuts compared to like the entirety of that park. But sometimes stress has a way of channeling or making us have tunnel vision and only allowing us to really focus on that one thing. And folks, I say this because we see that a lot, especially when people have come to the place where life stresses have brought them to such a low point to where even they've contemplated or talked about suicide. I've responded to several events on base where individuals talking about taking their life because things have just gotten so out of hand and so out of control. But they can only seem to focus on the one thing that was causing them stress. They ruled out all the other very important information about their lives. Like they had a great career, they had a really, really supportive family, and they had, education, degrees, and children. And the thing that they could only really look at is, man, my finances are terrible, and I'm about to go bankrupt. And stress has a way of bringing that focus to that one issue. And if you're out there today, folks, I don't can get a chance to really interact with you much. But if you are out there and if you're watching this and you get a chance to make comments, help each other out. Talk about those times that stress have come up for you. Make a little quick note of that in the chat, so that other people you can create some dialogue and conversation around these issues that your testimony or your sharing of a time where you felt that way could also encourage some of your sisters and brothers in arms to kind of maybe come out and talk about where they are with these things. um, but stress does have a way of getting us focused on the one thing in itself. And to be honest with you, I think it's by design. It is by survival design that we are that way. Because when you feel a high level of stress, it is important for survival purposes to focus on the thing that is causing me stress. If I am being chased by the proverbial lion, I'm not really gonna think about the monkey that's sitting in the tree or the other zebra that's like, why is he not chasing that zebra, or why is he not bothering that other ant? I'm gonna be thinking about the lion. And sometimes those lines in our lives are perceived stressors like finances and relationship challenges and communication. And I can be really tunnel vision on those things, and I can count out 1,000 and hundreds of other things that are going right in my life. So I think I beat that one down pretty good. So, but I really encourage you all to try to create some dialogue around these stress busting strategies. Um, Develop a gratitude practice. And if you all are on here now, I would tell you to start dropping some things that you just feel grateful about. Gratitude has been linked to tons and tons of positive relationship outcome, of positive decreasing in depression and stress outcome. Why? Because gratitude combats the reality of stress by allowing you, even in the midst of these difficult situations of things that are out of my control, gratitude allows me to focus on the good. It reminds me that, you know, this stressful situation is not the only thing that's happening in my life right now. So gratitude kind of keeps me in touch with my why, keeps me in touch with my purpose, and it allows me to continue to feel driven by things other than just stress. You know, but if you ever ask a depressed person, what are you grateful for? Well, like, I don't know. You know, I don't know. And we can get stuck. We call those cognitive traps. We can get stuck in our mindset in places where we start to discount the good. That is what we call a cognitive distortions, where I discount the good because I'm so focused on what I can't control and so focused on the stressful situation. So I also want to kind of throw that at you, that challenge of sharing gratitude. You know, if you get a chance, if you're hearing this live or virtually, go ahead and drop some gratitude, some things that you're grateful for in the box, or text someone, email someone today and tell them that you're grateful. And if you're feeling stressed, you know, and if you feel like you keep ruminating on something that is just obviously causing you a stressor, you know, take time and just write out some things that you really feel grateful for around the whole gratitude situation. Focus on the present. Man, I cannot tell you folks that nothing steals the present moment from us like stress. Anxiety and depression, I call those the big three. Sometimes anxiety has us so focused on things that are in the future that hadn't happened yet. Depression has us focused on things that have occurred that I just hadn't been able to release or let go. And stress just has us preoccupied, but in a very narrow way on things that are happening right now, but to the detriment of all of the other great things that are going on around us. But learning to be present requires us to be mindful, and it also requires us to be somewhat non-judgmental of what's going on. And when I say non-judgmental, it takes the appraisal of the situation away, and it allows that stressor to just be what it is. You know, not to be super negative, not to be overly positive, but it just is. And allowing me to just lean into what that is for me in the moment is a way to really practice mindfulness and being present. So talking to friends or do a physical activity as well. Talking to friends is very important. As long as that friend is not someone that's going to cause you more stress. I always tell the story. I have a one friend that I call, and sometimes I don't even know why I call him because he thinks the way to deal with helping me with my stress is to one up me with his stress. So he'll say, I'll tell him, man, I got a headache today. Oh man, I got two migraines. I'm like, bro, how do you have two migraines? That's not even possible. And so finding a way to talk to someone that can listen, that can be empathetic, that can even sympathize with you in some area. But making sure that you're kind of talking to friends that are encouraging you to just share more and not trying to one up you. Key point. So look for something potentially positive in the situation, different aspects of it, finding the positive in it, and slow down your breathing. Man, it's so important. I've worked with a guy um, who was responding. He works for public health services, and he's responded to a ton of, you know, serious virus crisis. And the one thing that we talked about was just spending time focusing on breathing, folks. Breathing is the source of life, and sometimes we detach from life and we become somewhat self-alienated. And breathing is a way to regain connection with the senses. So when you find yourself stressing, you're in your head, you're experiencing, you're in your thoughts, but finding a way to start breathing allows you to reconnect to the five senses, you know, seeing, touching, feeling, tasting. It allows you to just kind of reconnect with who you are, doing something good for someone else. All right, so using guided imagery is very helpful with also kind of changing, just like we can kind of talk ourselves into having having a negative thought and having our body perceive a stressor and then respond to that stressor. But we can also use guided imagery to perceive relaxation, basically, if I can say it that way. And so using this kind of to offset whenever I'm perceiving something to be negative, guided imagery allows me to perceive something that's positive and that promotes relaxation in the body instead of promoting stress in the body. So very, very effective. um, stress management technique. So the steps to guided imagery, and guided imagery simply involves bringing the image to a sharp sharp details in your mind. Finding a comfortable position, relaxing, concentrating on breathing. Make sure you're trying to keep an open attitude. Think of a visual theme or such, like a beach or forest. It can be a lake, a mountain, family, whatever promotes relaxation in your mind. But allowing yourself to use all senses. What am I seeing? What am I hearing? What am I tasting? What am I touching as it pertains to this image that I'm bringing into my mind's eye? The key is to keep the image in great detail and notice everything about them. Choose images that are personally meaningful, positive, detailed, enough to engage your mind and body. And I guarantee you, folks, I tried this and I've had to make a believer of a few of my friends. Oh, that stuff doesn't work. And I'm like, but if you think about it, if you can sit there and have a perceived thought, it's not even something that's happening for real. You can really you can think about something and it causes you to panic and be in so much stress. Why can't you work the opposite way with guided imagery and perceiving things that promotes relaxation? So try it on, see how you like it. Countering stressful thoughts, you can become very good at controlling negative thoughts. I read a research one time that says that on the average we have about 60,000 thoughts a day, and of those thoughts, it said about 80% of those thoughts are negative thoughts, things that we just ruminate on, and a lot of those thoughts are recycled from the day before. So we have even fewer new thoughts about things and situation. But learning to counter stressful thoughts. We spend a lot of time in the negatives. If we're all honest, we think about just negative aspects of things. And you know that it's difficult to come back from a negative thought. It takes about at least 5 to 10 positive thoughts to undo even one negative thought, like a 5-to-1 ratio, according to John Gottman. And if you were to look at some of you who like me, you get a chance to go TDY somewhere on the military dime, and you get a chance to use your per diem. You're gonna go to like one of the best restaurants. Like I don't go to really good restaurants. I go there whenever I get a chance to use some per diem. And you get on your phone and you look at like TripAdvisor or you look at Yelp, and you find out, these restaurants that got the best reviews and 4 or 5 stars. But the moment you see a restaurant and it has a negative experience on there from a customer, that negative experience will more than likely cause you to go to the next restaurant. That's the reason why a lot of corporate world, and restaurant managers get on there and try to respond to those, because they know the power of one negative thought. And they know how driven we are by negativity. So they're going to come on there and try to offer up some positive explanation as to why that negative thought was there. And there's also what I'm kind of researching is calling the algorithm of negativity, where if you go on YouTube and I know some of you've noticed this, and you've noticed with search engines, as you search for things on YouTube, whether it's through Google Chrome, whatever that is, whatever that search engine is, it's going to create that algorithm of finding the things that you typically would search for. Well, when we maintain like negative thoughts, our brain kind of does the same thing. We sniff out the things that we typically think about. And so if we're often stuck in negativity, guess what? The algorithm of that brain pattern is going to really sniff out negativity, and it's going to call for things that support where we are. So let's eliminate it. Let's get rid of it, right? So how do we recognize stressful thoughts? Man, we got all or nothing, and these are all called cognitive distortions or cognitive traps. It comes from the school of cognitive behavior therapy. Everything is black and white, or overgeneralizing, expecting one negative experience to hold true forever, diminishing the positive. Kind of talked about this earlier when we were talking about the importance of gratitude. Jumping to conclusions, making quick conclusions without considering the evidence. Catastrophizing, expecting the worst case scenario. Should or shouldn't thinking, holding strict standards that no one could actually live up to. Labeling, and folks, take a look at those and ask yourself, am I doing any of these? It's just a really quick, honest assessment. in terms of like, when it comes to the negative thoughts that, I'm having. You know, can you think of any other examples of repeated negative thoughts? This is not all of them, but there are some. These are some good examples, and it's a way to kind of get you thinking about how I think. And that's, what we call metacognition, like thinking about how you think. It's a real thing. Um, and so a better way to control your worry, we need to understand it. I prescribe this all the time in my therapy sessions with people that struggle with, especially depression and, anxieties and just, low self-esteem. A thought record allows you to keep track of our negative and worrisome thoughts. And so I would like everyone to list at least one worrisome or negative thought that they have had and fill in the four columns. When you get a chance, if you can maybe screenshot this worksheet, or even I can, Sergeant Hill can help you track this worksheet down. It's at the Yellow Ribbon website. You see the link there, and you can actually go and pull this worksheet down there and use it if you feel like it can be helpful for you. But ideally, you should keep this thought record for at least 2 weeks. Each time you have a worrisome thought, add it to the thought record. And you do not need a lot of details, just list the basics. In 2 weeks, you will have a very good picture of your thought record, just how you're thinking, and you can begin to examine patterns in your thoughts. For example, you can ask a question like, how frequently do I worry? When do I worry? What do I usually worry about? How strong are my feelings of worry? And the importance of doing this, why, is because we want to minimize that stress response. The more thoughts I have on there, the more I'm activating that stress response system. The more I am keeping my blood pressure elevated, the more I am affecting my digestive system, the more I am affecting my energy. Thought records allows me to kind of start targeting these areas that is contributing to that heightened, that increased, activated, I should say, stress response system. So thought record does not increase your negative thoughts or make you worry more. In fact, it starts to decrease your negative thoughts and worry because you are taking control of what has been out of control. And self-monitoring, like with a thought record, is a useful tool for helping to recognize and correct negative patterns or behaviors. It allows you to take that aerial view, to see these thoughts objectively. Like, oh man, I was worried about this morning, and then it wasn't even on my mind by the end of the day, and then maybe that next morning it will become something that you would worry less about, perhaps. So um, the alternative to negative and worrisome thoughts begins with relying on evidence and not emotions. um, do not just accept worry, but question it. And this is also from, of course, the school of cognitive behavior therapy. Most of the things that, of course, I'm sure you guys have heard this phrase that we worry about rarely comes true. And it's also examining the evidence, putting that negative and that worrisome thought on trial and basically, questioning it for what it is and not just accepting the fact that it's true. We often have the tendency to see feelings as factual, and that's something you can hear from the world of emotional intelligence, is that feeling is not always factual. And actually very seldom is feelings factual. They're informative, and it's very important to know and understand them, but then it doesn't necessarily mean because I feel it that is reality. And sometimes that could be helpful with recognizing that, and combating those negative or worrisome thoughts too. And some other questions to ask. When do I worry? What is the focus of my worry? You know, um, what is the goal of my worry? Is there a benefit to worrying? Maybe I benefit from worrying because it allows me not to be surprised, by anything that's going to happen. Are there things? What is going on when I worry? Who is around when I worry? What do I get out of worrying? What am I predicting will happen? Am I fortune telling? And am I using one of the cognitive distortions? Am I overgeneralizing? Is my worrying coming from seeing things in black and white? Is it coming from mind reading? um, what is the evidence against what I'm predicting? And what is the best or worst that could happen? What might be an alternative view of the situation? If someone I cared about had the same worry, what advice would I give them? Those are just some other helpful strategies that can that you can use. And so here's an example of how a way to counter those stressful thoughts too, is just giving it that rating. This is a closer look at that thought record. And you develop a strategy or a minimizer. It is giving it a rating and figuring out, what that is, what the situation was, what was the stressful thought, what was I thinking? Because if I think about the situation and this thought that came with it, it allows me to assess, what was it that I was really worried about? Well, I was worried that, something had happened. Okay. And then you can kind of rate that for yourself. And then what are the minimizers to that? Well, my teenager came home late. Okay, what was you worried about? Well, I was worried that something terrible had happened. And then minimizes, well, they had a cell phone. They was with, their friend. These are all minimizer things that could allow me to, in the moment, I might have not considered all of these things, but now, after thinking about it, there are some things there that could have, prevented, we stay in a relatively safe community, so on and so forth, that can allow me to kind of decrease that worry. Just a little bit. So as we come to the end of Address Your Stress, the goal was to simply identify when stress impacts your well-being. I also wanted to throw some strategies and techniques to address stress your way. Some key points: practice coping strategies and relaxation techniques to help you manage stress. Not all techniques work for everyone. Find one that you will like and works for you, and seek help if stress becomes beyond your ability to cope, and being able to identify or recognize when I have reached my capacity to deal with this stressor, and when I need to phone a friend, to call someone to help me to deal with this. And folks, that's okay. But that is the end of this briefing. I'll turn it back over to Sergeant Hill to prepare us for our next one. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Mr. Harris.